You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast, episode number 14. True originality cannot begin until you know what you're breaking away from. Blake Snyder.
Broadcasting from a dark, windowless room in Hollywood, when we really should be working on that next draft. It's the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast, showing you the craft and business of screenwriting while teaching you how to make your screenplay bulletproof. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, unlike other script coverage services, Bulletproof Script Coverage actually focuses on the kind of project you are and the goals of the project you are. So we actually break it down by three categories: micro budget, indie film market, and studio film. There's no reason to get coverage from a reader that's used to reading tentpole movies when your movie is going to be done for $100,000. And we wanted to focus on that at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Our readers have worked with Marvel Studios, CAA, WME, NBC, HBO, Disney, Scott Free, Warner Brothers, The Blacklist, and many, many more. So if you need your screenplay or TV script covered by professional readers, head on over to covermyscreenplay.com. Today's show is also sponsored by Indie Film Hustle Pro, our private and growing community for filmmakers and screenwriters. It was created for film creatives like you to meet, network, and support each other, learn from film industry experts, and to get the answers to your burning questions and more. The journey in this business is rough. There is no guarantee to success, but your chances of reaching your goals dramatically improve when you find others who are on the same journey as you and you work together towards a common goal. That is why I put together IFH Pro. Inside, you'll get professional networking, private and safe spaces to discuss the film business, access to advanced tools and education, up-to-date education, exclusive content not available publicly, access to IFH Pro workshops, webinars, special guests, and so much more. If you want to check it out, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/pro. Now, today's guest is Jose Silerio from Save the Cat, Blake Snyder's amazing book. Blake passed a few years ago, but Jose is keeping the torch going on his amazing work, on Blake's amazing work with Save the Cat. If you're a screenwriter today, or you're an aspiring screenwriter today and have not read the book Save the Cat, you have to go out, stop listening, go to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/071 and click on the link to buy the book. It is a must-read for all screenwriters. It's remarkable what Blake was able to do, kind of revolutionized screenwriting, and I wanted to reach out to the Save the Cat community and wanted to share what Blake had done with Save the Cat with our community, our tribe. So Jose was nice enough to talk to us about Blake, about Save the Cat, and all the revolutionary ideas that he came up with all those years ago when he wrote Save the Cat. So without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Jose Silerio.
Hey, thank you very much for having us, Alex. We're happy from Save the Cat to be part of this and just to help out screenwriters as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Blake Snyder's work and Save the Cat. I read all three books, and they're amazing, and they've kind of changed the business a lot ever since they were released. So, can you tell me a little bit about Blake and Save the Cat for people who don't know it?
Yeah, definitely. As you said, Save the Cat really sort of became big in the industry, and that's not just simply us tooting our own horn, but it's really from our own experience. Even when Blake was still around, we saw how his method, his books really became popular. And Blake really, he's a screenwriter just like most of us, right? He started screenwriting way back in the 80s. He started working for his dad in his dad's animation series, doing the voices for the kid in the show and all that. And he got into screenwriting way back in the 80s, and he sold several scripts throughout his career, something like I think 12 or 13 altogether. And then he had a couple that were made, which is Blank Check, and Stop or Your Mom Will Shoot, which are kind of the more famous ones he did that came out. But I think from Blake, really, what he did with Save the Cat and how it evolved for him was that, just like everybody else in the industry, especially for writers, there are those ups and down moments. And as a writer, you're always, struggling to sort of break in. Right? Even though, and as he said this, even though you're in already, you kind of have to keep proving yourself over and over.
Oh, it's what have you done? It's like Janet Jackson says, what have you done for me lately?
Exactly. Right? And I think that kind of came from him. It's like knowing that struggle that he went through, he wanted to make sure that other writers following him sort of had it a little bit easier, if I can put it that way. And he found, he had his own method of developing structure. And it's funny because he had this little story, and I can't actually remember if it was in the book, wherein his introduction to structure was that he this was like early 90s or late 80s. He was telling me he went into one of these development meetings. He submitted a script. The producer was there, and then they started talking about the script. And the producer goes to him, "So what's your break, act 2 break?" And he was just, he just kind of just started nodding his head and kind of just talking about the story more, right? But then after the meeting ended, when all the other producers moved out and all that, the one producer who's really with him throughout the project pulled him aside and said, "You don't know what the act 2 break is, right?" And kind of said, "Yeah, I have no idea what it was." So
right.
It sort of became his introduction into creating structure and him realizing that, in order to tell a good story, regardless of the story, we need structure. And again, so he developed his own system, which eventually became the Save the Cat method. And again, because it's from his own experience of wanting to help other writers later down the road, he just simply wanted to share it because it started working for him. And like you said, once he wrote Save the Cat, the first book, and it was published, and people really gravitated toward it, and it just exploded.
Now, do you know where Save the Cat came from? The name?
Well, the name "Save the Cat" itself is a term that he uses, and it's a simple way for your audience to like your main hero immediately.
Perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's a "Save the Cat" literally comes from the term saving a cat. And what it is, it's you give your hero an action to do early on in the movie, in the script, that makes us say, "Oh, that's a nice guy. I like this person." Which will make me want to follow this person's journey for the rest of the movie.
Which would be the opposite of that would be Kick the Dog, which would be my book. Kick the Dog.
Yeah,
How to be an evil person.
And it's a great way to introduce a villain.
Right. Anybody who kicks a dog is like, that guy's bad. So it's a perfect example. So that's where it comes from. Okay, great. So how did you get involved with Save the Cat?
It's funny. I got involved with Save the Cat exactly the same way like everybody discovers Save the Cat, which is I read the book. I didn't know Blake, before the book came out. But when I read the book, and I tell this to all, people, all writers I work with, I'm a very lazy reader. Sorry to say it. The book, even it was as thick as Save the Cat. I mean, it's not really that thick.
No, it's not. It's not a hard read.
Yeah, it would usually, a book that thick would even take me something like a year to read.
You're really lazy. You're a really lazy reader.
But with Save the Cat, I sat down, opened page 1, and couldn't put it down. It was, like you said, it was a very easy read. But more than being an easy read, I think it's just, you get it right away. You get what Blake is talking about. And the nice thing about it, it really was sort of, for me, this is my reaction, it was very encouraging. It was really telling me that, this is something that I can do. And a lot of the things that I found myself like, oh no, as a screenwriter, like I'm getting stuck here. He was kind of explaining it and telling me, no, this is all you have to do. And that's how I got into Save the Cat. I read the book. He had this email address there, which everybody knows who've read the book. I wrote him, kind of just asking about other stuff and all that. And then one day he immediately, not one day, but immediately he kind of asked me saying, "Hey, I need help with a script that I need to read. And if you can give me notes, maybe we can build something together." And luckily,
you were at the right place at the right time, as
exactly.
They say.
The stars aligned for me, kind of. So that's how I got into Save the Cat, and that was like way back in 2006, 2007.
God, so I can't believe that's way back.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like 10 years now.
Wow. So can you explain to everybody what a beat sheet is? Because I remember the first time I was in an executive meeting and someone goes, "So where's your beat sheet?" And I'm like, So you see, the character does this. It's very similar to what Blake did. I'm like, I just try to keep going with it, but then afterwards I found out what a beat sheet was. But so can you explain to everybody what a beat sheet is?
Well, a beat sheet, especially with Save the Cat, and a lot of.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
A lot of other, I guess, teachers, producers, whoever, everybody has their own kind of definition for the beat sheet is. But so I'm kind of gonna go with the Save the Cat definition. It's really, as Blake put, the beat sheet really has, and for us we have what we call the 15 beats, the 15 key beats. And this, what it does is the 15 beats of the beat sheet, the Save the Cat, the Blake Snyder beat sheet. It just really pinpoints the 15 key beats that your hero must go through in order to tell a good story. These are moments that must be happening to your hero, right? And your hero must be doing as well in order for us to be able to follow that structure, that story, in a way that's very familiar for the audience. And again, when I say familiar, I'm not saying you're just merely copying from other movies, other scripts, or other books that you've read before. But story structure is something that's been ingrained in all of us ever since, from nursery rhymes, telling jokes. There's always a structure, and that beats, those 15 beats is something that Blake sort of not really developed, but he even says this is his own
discovered.
But even not discovered, but he just kind of made it clearer for everybody.
Gotcha.
And he said, and he, having studied all these films that he felt like, what really successful films he really liked, he said, he discovered that there were these 15 beats that were always present. And that's what, I guess a beat sheet is. You have this 15 beats that go from, in Save the Cat terminology, go from opening image all the way down to the final image. That, like I said earlier, that your hero must go through. So in short, I guess it's really like an outline. But really, it's a good way to really help you as a writer figure out what's happening, and more importantly, when it should be happening to your hero.
Right. It's kind of, well, what I've taken from structure is, because when I write, I my structure is pretty sound because I like structure. I like having those tent poles to be able to write to. So it's like, okay, from here to this point, this has to happen. So how I get to point A to point B is up to me as the writer, but I have a place to go. Without that structure, you're just kind of like meandering all over the place.
Exactly. I think it's what you said, the nice term that you used was tentpole, which is exactly, what Blake also mentions, that I think a lot of times, and I say this all the time, like when I went to film school way back when, the screenwriting classes 101, the thing that I really always got was, okay, there's act 1, act 2, act 3.
Yeah, right.
Kind of like,
that's very vague.
Yeah. How do you fill it in? And that's what, the Save the Cat beat sheet of Blake does, is that at least in act 1, you know what should be happening in act 1, because right away you know which beats must be happening within that act and where, again, it's happening. Then same thing when you go to act 2 and act 3.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's a series on YouTube that has they take the Save the Cat method and they beat it out with movies. I don't know if it's wonderful to watch because you're like Back to the Future, E.T., Terminator, Titanic, and you just start watching them and they literally are beating it out. So they're like, here's this beat. This is when this happens in the movie. This is when this happens in the movie. And you just sit there and you use examples of it. Can you give us a few examples films that use Save the Cat very, very well?
Geez. I mean,
the hours of them, I know, but just a couple of the big ones.
Yeah, even that big one, well, like, some of the Oscar winners, like King's Speech, Argo. I mean, very clear and strong beats. An Oscar-nominated one, which I really liked from 2 years ago, was Whiplash.
Yeah, great film.
Again, all the beats were there. But the nice thing about, these movies where you kind of see is that, you can go there, and I'm probably biased already by this time, at this point, right? I've been done this for 10 years. That, I'm watching there, but still, right? I try to avoid saying, "Oh, there's a catalyst. Oh, there's the midpoint." Oh,
it's rough. Look, I'll tell you, I've been in visual effects and post-production for a long time, and it's tough for me to go to a movie sometimes. It's tough for me to kind of just let go. Yeah. And I just recently let go when I saw Star Wars. So I completely was not looking at anything technical. I was just on the ride. And it's for a film to do that to, to people like us that are really into it. I mean, that's a really good sign of the filmmaker who's been able to cut through all of our armor, if you will, of biases. Like, oh, that green screen didn't really look that great. Oh, that story point, that's the catalyst. Oh, that's the turning point. And I catch myself doing that all the time now with lesser movies. But
like you said, the well-made ones really are those where
you forget
it's there, but you don't see it.
Exactly. Or you look back and you go back to it later and watch it on a second time, and then you'll analyze it maybe in a second or third screening of it. But the first time you just enjoy it, and it's coming, but you just kind of you're in the story as you should be.
Yeah, exactly. And those are they did their job well. And like you said, when we go back, then we start realizing, oh, that's why we like this part, because here it is. It was building up to the midpoint. It's going now to the all is lost and all that.
Now, have you seen new Star Wars?
I have.
And how is it hang in the Saving the Cat paradigm?
I think it hangs very well in terms of the beat sheet itself, of having the beats there. The way they introduce the characters, how they set up, the setup.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. I'll try to be very careful. Right? But even the big moment, the big all is lost moment. I think even I'm not going to say it here out loud. I think I know you. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Of course.
Right? So even though we know specifics, we know that beat was there.
Of course.
Again, clear third act, right? We know what the third act is, and the beats are still there. So yeah, I think I would love to say that of course J.J. Abrams and wrote Red Saved the Cat before.
Yeah, right. Of course,
before writing it. But I think great filmmakers, great writers, they just know.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you look at all the big movies, the most successful movies, whether they be blockbusters or Oscar winners, generally they all follow the beat. They all follow the structure. Whether, and I think what Blake did so well with Save the Cat is that screenwriting is a complex scenario. It's not an easy way to write. It's much easier to write in many ways a novel, because you can meander and you can kind of just delve into the deepness of how the tree looks today. And you can't do that in the screenplay. It has to be very condensed, has to be very concise. Every word it has to have a meaning and move the story forward. And I think what Blake did so brilliantly is that he brought it down to the masses, where a lot of that kind of terminology was more upper tier, if you will, like at the at a film school or at the higher end, like the UCLA screenwriting program, or these kind of really epic, big, huge institutions that were kind of like guarding the information. And Blake kind of took that information and said, now you all may have it. And now here, now go and write, be well.
And I completely agree with you on that. I mean, there's definitely, if you kind of go the Joseph Campbell route,
of course,
which is very, and again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a great system as well. But like you said, when with Blake, with Save the Cat, he kind of brought it down to the masses. Those who weren't kind of more into mythological stuff, but just wanted to sort of just go straight into it.
Well, I mean, what the writer's journey was, or what the hero's journey is, it works well, obviously, with Save the Cat. It's there, but it's different. It's a little bit not as simple. Like Save the Cat is as simple as you can get. Like if you're a screenwriter starting out, read Save the Cat, then go off and read everything else. But Save the Cat is a great base to start from, because and that's again one of the reasons I wanted you guys on the show, because the book was so influential. And then you can go off and read 1,000,000 books on screenwriting.
There's the nice thing about it also, it's that although Blake really wrote Save the Cat for writers, really more than anybody, for writers to help them move forward with their own writing, and they feel like they're stuck. They can kind of go, but it's also a great way really to analyze movies.
Oh God, yes.
And kind of figure out why they're working.
That's why he wrote that second book, right?
Exactly.
Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, right?
Exactly.
Which was great. It was a wonderful example to kind of go, and he just starts breaking down the movies, and you're just like, my God. I remember the first time I discovered, the first book I ever read was Sid Field's. That was when I was in. Now I'm going way back. This is like the 90s. So, and when I discovered that there was a structure because he was the first one I ever heard any kind of structure.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, at 15 minutes this happens? And and then I just started going back to all my movies. I'm like, oh my God, and I thought I had cracked the code. It was so revolutionary to me. For someone who doesn't understand or doesn't know about it, it's so great. But again, what Save the Cat does so well is it simplifies it so beautifully. And we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. I don't want to say it's like right by numbers because there's a lot of creativity involved, but it gives you those tent poles that you can just make. It's a lot easier. You don't have to think about structure. You could just decorate the house. You don't have to worry about the foundation.
Exactly. I think that's the best way to put it, because there is always, and I always talk about it, because there is, there are always those the detractors who kind of say it is a paint by numbers thing. Mm-hmm. And I think when people say that, they're not getting the whole picture, because we're just talking about structure.
Right. It's a house.
Your character, their traits, their
dialogue, everything.
Exactly. It's on the writer, right? And that's for you to make your characters unique. And once you add that, then it becomes a totally different story. But you have the structure there already.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said before. It's like literally you could have a house with a complete foundation and structure done. Now, how that's decorated, it could be decorated a million different ways.
Exactly.
It's all depending on how the writer wants to go forward. So a lot of screenwriters always hear about coverage, like, oh, we're going to get coverage, and I got bad coverage, or I got good coverage, and your script needs coverage from a studio or production company. Can you explain a little bit about coverage to those who don't know in the audience?
Well, I think it's like you said, coverage really is more of like, you have the reader. Obviously, you have the higher ups who can't read all the scripts that go to their studios. Mm-hmm. So they need the Cliff Notes version, right? Of scripts that come in. And I think that's for me, that's kind of what coverage is. You have the readers who read it and they put their notes down on the script that they read, kind of going through structure, characters, dialogue, giving it its sort of, and, different studios will have different styles or different methods, but they have kind of a point system, and they grade it accordingly. And that's, I think that's the simple way of just describing what coverage is. So that now that piece of paper, and hopefully for most it's a one pager, right? That goes now to the next junior executive.
If it passes, because they might, they might.
Exactly, right? Yeah. If it passes and goes to them, they read the script and they do their own version of the next higher up coverage. It goes to the next higher up guy. So that's, I think that's the simple, like I said, a simple version of explaining what coverage is. It's really a cover letter, for the script, kind of just telling us what the script is, or telling the executive what the script is all about, and and how it meets certain criteria for them.
Now, the thing is that as a screenwriter, and I've gone through the coverage process in the studio system, it's very frustrating, because sometimes you might not get the reader that's really gets it. And a lot of people have passed on Oscar winners, in coverage. Yeah. And it happens. And that's very frustrating a lot of times, because you're like, oh my God, I forgot. There's some legendary ones. I just don't remember any of them off the top of my head, but that got passes at certain studio. Well, Star Wars was passed everywhere. I mean, just the original Star Wars was like, what?
Yeah. That's very true. And a lot of bigger producers kind of like, I don't think, they didn't get it.
They don't get it. So, and the script was like, oh, what's this giant monkey who's walking around with this guy, and he's his sister. What? No, forget, there's incest involved. This is horrible. So, so it happens.
True, like you said, it's some sort of involved in it, that your script gets to the right person at the right time.
Yeah.
Right, so that they that whoever the reader is, that they're reading it in the right frame of mind in order to get it and be and hopefully be objective enough while reading it.
I think also one thing that I've learned in my journeys, and from talking to so many different screenwriters and producers and executives, is that at a certain point, you have to, even if they might pass on it, you have to write something so good that even they go, I don't get it, but man, this is really well written. And there's a lot of that. Like, this is not going to be made into a movie, but you're a good writer. And I think that's what writers should do as best they can, is try to make the best thing. As Steve Martin says, be so good that they can't ignore you.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And this is what I always tell writers, especially those who say, okay, what's the secret to sort of breaking in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think there really isn't a secret. The secret is you come up with a really great script, a really
Right.
well-written script. So much,
Oddly enough.
yeah, yeah, and because and I truly believe this because I've heard it from a lot of executives, from producers themselves, and they say, the industry really is, they're wanting for the next great script, right? So the moment you have a great script that goes out, you don't. It's gonna catch fire,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's gonna spread, on its own, just because of once somebody says there's a great script out there, everybody starts looking for it, and I think that's really sort of the secret to just breaking in. But you have to do again your homework. You have to show them, like you were saying earlier, right? That as a writer, you have to show these people, the readers, the producers,
Mm-hmm.
that you know how to write the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it takes to be able to be a good storyteller.
Yeah, I know a lot of writers who put in a script and they said, this is not going to work for us, but I want to hire you for another job because you can write.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. And I know a lot of screenwriters who make a living never being produced.
Yeah.
They just keep optioning, or they're working, or they're script doctoring, and they've never had a single credit to their name.
Yeah.
But they've made millions doing this behind the scenes. There's many guys who do this in Hollywood.
Yeah, many, and there are even a lot of those who not just option out, their scripts, even though the script doesn't get made, but they get hired to rewrite again, other scripts again without being credited for it, and and that's a great job to have.
To a certain, I guess after you've made your first 2 or 3 million doing that, at a certain point you just want to go, I wouldn't mind getting something made. But I wish I had these problems. I don't know about you, Jose, but I wish I had that. Like, I've already made my 3 million this year, so I really would,
Then I can just play around.
Let me just play around. Let's just
follow the passion project and finally
make that passion project. I've been watching about that one-legged hooker in New York, the Puerto Rican hooker who really wants to dance, but she only has one leg. It's a Sundance winner, I can tell you.
As long as she has a heart of gold.
She has a heart of gold. I know. I tell you, every time I always tell people that story. They're like, "Okay, you want to get into Sundance? Make a movie about a handicapped, one-legged Puerto Rican hooker with a heart of gold who really wants to dance, but is beaten by her drunken father, who also happens to be a transgender." I'm just saying that alone would win Sundance every year, guaranteed. But you have to follow the 15 beats. If not, it doesn't work.
Exactly. If not, it doesn't work at all.
So, a lot of also with screenwriters, a lot of emphasis is put on the log line, and I know you guys talk a lot about log lines. Can you give a little bit of advice on how to construct a really great log line and explain what a log line is to people who don't know?
Well, I think a log line can be. I'll be honest with you. A log line for me is always the trickiest thing to write.
It's rough.
And I always tell this to writers. Blake talks about it in the book, in the Save the Cat, that his process was, write the log line. One of the first things he did was write the log line, right, before beating it out. And that's great because it gives you a good idea of what your story is. But that particular log line that you write, the first log line you write, is most probably also not going to be the same log line, the same story, but eventually what the script will be.
Right.
Because as you start writing, things will start changing. You start discovering more about, your characters and stories. It will change. So there is a log line that I think it's great to have early on to keep you sort of on track as to what you think your story is, or what you envision it to be. But there is also that log line at the very end that really captures the real story, and you have to know the difference as writers. But for me, just of what regardless of which particular log line you're writing on, the early on or the one that you really want to stand out already, the things that I look for are always going to be, which this is basic screenwriting 101, but I call them the big three, which is it has to be able to clearly convey whose story it belongs to, which is the hero, number one. What the hero wants, meaning the goal, and what's stopping the hero from getting the want. What's the problem? So the hero, the goal, and the problem for me are the big three, and I think that has to be very, very clear in a log line to make it really compelling. And this isn't and this is like a 1 or 2 out of 3. You have to make sure it's a 3 out of 3 thing. If not, you have no story. And if that's not there in the logline, then your logline won't have a story. So it's very important to be able to make sure that all the 3 elements have it in your logline, that you have it in your logline. Another thing that I like, which Blake really pointed out in the book, is having a sense of irony.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
In the log line, and what that really means is that I think what you want to show is that why is this hero, right, the person to go on this journey, right? So you want to be able to build up even in your log line, right, that why this particular hero is going to be the hero. Why is this journey going to be the hardest thing that this hero is going to be? So it's really building that up, because what you're really telling us is that of all the people in the world, right, this is not the right person to do it.
Right.
This is not the right person to go on this journey. But that's what makes it compelling.
Die Hard.
Right?
Die Hard.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
But if you end up always having, Mr. Universe go up against, the big evil, whoever that is, right? Then
that's Commando. That's Commando.
Yeah. or Steven Seagal movies.
Oh,
right?
good Lord.
Right way is going to win at the end of the day.
Right. There's never a chance maybe Steven might not win. No, he's going to win.
He's going to win. Right, and we know that, and that works for who he is, right? And the characters that he plays. But again, for the rest of you who are not writing, action type movies or commando type movies, right? You have to find a way to tell us, to make sure that just by reading the log line, a 1 sentence, line, that we understand. We understand what the story is, but more importantly, is that it's a very compelling story. And again, by doing that, is again giving us that sense of irony, in the sense that you're introducing us to a character who is not supposed to be going on this journey.
Right. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. You brought up a really good point. I wanted to kind of focus on real quick, that the irony of a character, that he's not supposed to, she's not supposed to be the one on the journey. Ripley from Aliens comes to mind. Sarah Connor from Terminator. Die Hard, John McClane. The Lethal Weapon boys. Like, there's no reason for them to work, and they do.
We talked about Star Wars, right?
And Star Wars, the young farm boy who's going up against the Empire.
Exactly.
That's what
King's speech. Talk about
yes,
King's speech, the would-be king who just stutters, right?
Right, exactly. Like, he has no and it's something as simple as that. Like, it's not a big, huge action thing. It's about a guy who stutters, who has to not stutter, and he has to inspire a nation. Exactly. Like, that's a simple concept. It's not brain surgery. But then when you brought that up, I just went back through my mental Rolodex of movies, and I'm like, a lot of those 80s action movies, like Commando, like every Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, like every Steven Seagal movie, and bad action movies, there isn't that. A bad action movie, and don't get me, I love all those movies because I was young when I saw them and I love them. And there's character and charismatic things about Arnold and about Sylvester Stallone and all those things in those certain kind of movies. But the movies that really stand the test of time, like I just watched Die Hard again because it's my Christmas movie. I always watch because I don't care what anyone says. It's the best Christmas movie of all time. I don't care what anyone says.
Hans.
Yes, Hans. No, if you don't see Hans Gruber falling out of a window at the end of the day, it's not really Christmas for me. So that's just me. Ho ho ho. So but I just literally saw it like a few weeks ago. And I was like, I can't believe how wonderful and how brilliantly it's done. And it literally, that movie alone spawned hundreds of ripoffs, like Die Hard in a boat, Die Hard in a train, Die Hard in a plane, all this kind of stuff. It was such a brilliant and pinnacle movie, but it's what you were talking about. It's the irony of that character who has no business doing that. Predator is another one. Like, even though Arnold and this entire team are big, muscle bound, but they're up against something they have no business, they can't beat. And that's what makes a good, really, really good, compelling story. And I think that's where a lot of writers, especially of bad action movies, we really can learn something from. Please.
And I think that's, Die Hard is a great example because, in the 80s, we were used to seeing all the Schwarzenegger movies,
Right.
The Rambo, Stallone movies. They're all like this muscle bound, and suddenly we get introduced to John McClane,
Right.
and it's not really that toned of he's not
No, he's a normal dude.
He's a normal dude.
He's a normal dude.
Down on his luck, and he's about to get a divorce. Right, he's trying to plead with his wife to stay together.
He's a New Yorker in L.A., which, trust me, I understand.
Yeah, so what's cracking, So he became he's this totally different guy who gets thrown into, in a bigger than life scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the brilliance of the barefoot and the bleeding and it's just so brilliantly crafted. I don't know, I forgot the name of the screenwriter of that one, but it's so brilliantly crafted, so brilliantly directed, and it holds even though it's 80s and you could it's so fun to watch because of all the 80s stuff in it. But it's so brilliant. RoboCop, another one of those, like absolutely brilliant. Like there's no reason for that hero to be able to do what he does. And go through what he's going through. So that's a great. I've never heard anyone say that, but the irony of the character or the hero is something that should be very important in your writing process.
Yeah, I think so, because again, it's if there's not that sense of irony, meaning that your hero is not the right person or shouldn't be the person to be going against this problem or having this goal, right? As a writer, you'll find out easily that you'll you stop writing by page 30 because you're unable to generate more conflict for your hero.
Right.
You lose right away that sense of tension because your hero, you haven't, as we like to say in Save the Cat, you haven't taken your hero as far back as possible.
Right.
So if they're already a great superhero in the first act, right, then again, whatever you throw out in front of them in the second act is something that they can easily overcome. And once that happens, your story ends at page 30.
And that's, I think, one of the main problems with most Superman movies, or even telling a Superman story. It's so difficult to create conflict for a god.
Exactly.
And it's except for the very first one that Richard Donner did, and he did it so magically. It's like everyone's been trying to get back to that, but it's tough to create conflict. Like that's why Batman works better than Superman, because Batman's a dude who, he's a billionaire and he has stuff, but he can get hurt. He can get, blood. He can get his back broken. He can do all this stuff.
And his backstory is so much more complex. He was orphaned. His parents were killed. He saw them get killed.
It's so much meatier.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's not just a physical story, but really more of the emotional story is what's really pulls us in.
So I'm really curious to see how this Batman versus Superman fiasco. I think it's going to be a fiasco. That's just me, but this is my personal opinion. I looked at the trailer the other day. Now we're going off topic here, but I saw the trailer the other day and I was just like, wow, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. I hope it does. I'm a fan, but but then I saw that Captain America Civil War. I'm like, this is brilliant. You've got look at the conflict in that. It's like, it's the ultimate conflict of friends that we've grown up with, or people have seen through these movies, and now they're fighting for ideologies. It's just like, brilliant. I'm sorry, I've gone off on a tangent on superhero movies. I apologize. So what are some of the biggest mistakes you see with screenplays when you read them, from like first-time writers or just screenplays in general?
I think especially for us with Save the Cat, we get a lot of for the first-time screenwriters. Even though when they say first-time, it's those who have written several but haven't really sold anything yet. And one thing I've noticed of late is that a lot of screenwriters tend to write a character that's based off another character that they saw in a movie. Right?
Really? Are you still seeing a lot of that?
Yeah, it is. And it's like we were talking about Die Hard, right?
Right. Oh God.
Die Hard came out. There's Die Hard in a plane, Die Hard in a train, Die Hard in a ship.
Sudden Impact. Don't forget that one. Jean-Claude Van Damme. Die Hard in a ice rink.
So there's a lot of. I think a lot of people kind of do that still. I want to make the next Taken. I want to make the next.
God. There was after Taken came out, there must have been 1,000 Taken scripts made.
Right. Or after Bridesmaids came out, I want to make the next Bridesmaid, or The Hangover, right? After Hangover came out, I want to make the next Hangover. So they're writing characters, they're writing stories based off other characters that we've seen already, or that they simply know from watching, right? From the film. It's not characters that they really know in real life.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. Right.
And I think that's one big mistake screenwriters, especially the newer ones, do nowadays, is that they start writing off characters that, this is what John McClane would do. But again, you're not writing John McClane anymore, and you have to find in your own writing. Again, we mentioned this earlier. Coming up with your own voice, what makes you unique as a writer. You have to be able to find, what makes your characters unique as well. And that's really by, writing characters based off people in real life. Right? That crazy aunt that you have, or
absolutely.
Right? Or the old buddy you had from high school who's now just, whether he's truly successful, but in a bad marriage. But there are a lot of things that you can pull out of real people who surround us daily. Right? And I think, that makes it more interesting, because now we start seeing people who we know, can be a little bit more complex, who may not necessarily go left when we think everybody's going left. What makes them different, right? And I think that's something that newer writers need to learn more, how to build better characters.
I think also what you're saying is advice for every aspect of filmmaking, in the sense of be yourself and stop trying to be someone else, whether that be a writer, whether that be a director. Like, I'm going to be the next Quentin Tarantino. I'm like, no, you're not. You can't be, because there's only one Quentin Tarantino. Yeah. There's only one Scorsese. There's only one Shane Black. Yeah. I mean, how many people try to rip off Shane Black after Lethal Weapon and after, everyone tried to write like Shane. Yeah. When he was making, in the olden days, when everyone was making $2 million a spec script, sales that don't happen nowadays. But if you just be true to your vote, because if you notice, all of those guys are original. They're all being themselves. Yeah. And their original voice came out 10, 20 years ago. Right? And it worked for them. So now it's time for the newer writers who want to break into to find what is your original voice for today's time. Right, because things that worked 20 years ago will not work today. Yeah. And that's a huge, and that's when screenwriting and in filmmaking is a general statement. A lot of people keep going at it from that point of view of like, I'm going to do what Shane Black. I'm like, no. Yeah. It's a different place, different world today. So
I think, if I may,
yes, please.
I have time, but another, I think, common mistake that newer writers have nowadays is just simply overwriting. Especially when it comes to the description and the action part of it may not necessarily be an action movie, but when they start describing the action that's going on, they describe it to to the most minute detail, right? Or
they write it like a novelist,
Yeah, exactly. Right? Or even trying to describe a character, they over describe it. And I think what this does is, especially for me, as when I'm reading it, it takes away a sense of creativity on my end. Because now you're making me think very specifically of an action, of a person. And that, in a way, kind of takes away from the read. Because now my mind is, again, and this is something writers have to realize, is that your first audience is not the person who buys the movie ticket. Right? Your first audience is the reader, right? And you have to know that, they don't have the benefit of music. They don't have the benefit of actual faces of actors that they can follow. So reading a page is a little bit harder. They have to work a little bit harder in order to follow the story. So don't overdo it, right? By putting in too much detail, by making it too specific, that that the reader themselves start losing that ability to build the world on their own and get more into it. I think if as readers, if we're given that opportunity to build the world a little bit on our own as we're reading the story, then it becomes more interesting. It becomes more exciting.
The other day I was reading a script that was sent to me by a professional writer, like a real with credits, with everything for a project. And when I read it, I had been reading so many bad scripts that when I read this one, I was like, oh, this is what a writer's like. It was so brilliant. Yeah. The structure was spot on. Every word was like, and I was analyzing it as I was reading it because I was just so taken by like, oh, okay, so he condensed everything right. He didn't overwrite everything. He left it open for your interpretation, but yet gave you just enough. There's that fine balance when you're writing like that. And it was just so wonderful to read. It was a joy to read as opposed to reading, 98% of scripts written.
Yeah.
which is rough.
Yeah. No, I've had those moments, right?
Right.
When you get the script from a professional, right?
Right.
And it's like, before you know it, you're right in page 90.
Right. Exactly. Right? And you're a slow reader.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I know, oh, this is a good one.
This is a good, and I think that's also advice for like people who are trying to get readers to get coverage and stuff like that. They will notice, because they read so much crap all the time that when something of quality walks through the door, whether they like the subject matter or not, they'll recognize talent in the writing, and it blares out. It like that, just it screams at you because. Yeah. It's not like you're in a bunch of William Goldman scripts and Shane Black scripts and Tarantino scripts are all tossed in. You're like, oh, who's really good? No, it's like a bunch of crap. And then you get that one piece of gold that comes in every once in a while. So I was fascinated when I was doing a little research for this interview. I found out that Save the Cat has some software.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was kind of exciting.
Yeah, we actually do have a software. And the nice thing about the software, it really follows the Save the Cat method.
Oddly enough,
as it's laid out, I guess what I should have said was as it's laid out in the book, in the first book, the way Blake kind of goes through it step by step, right? So even in the software, it kind of forces you, if I may use that word, it kind of forces you first to come up with, what's the genre that you want to pick for this story. Then it tells you to do the log line, right? And then, but you're not able to jump right away into the beat sheet or the board, unless you go through it step by step first. But the nice thing about it is that if you do follow the steps coming up with log line, then only with the log line you'll be able to go and do the beat sheet. Once you have your beat sheet, that's only when you're able to go and do the board. But it has all the elements of what makes the Save the Cat method. And what like I said, it kind of forces you to go through it step by step. I think that's the nice thing about it, because it really helps you think and not just. I know there's, us writers, we're always eager to jump into page one and fade in, right? But that can also always get us into trouble right away. There is, you take the time to first think about the idea, first think about the premise and the story, start beating it out, start building that outline, start building the structure before you actually go to page one. And that's what I think that's the software is good at. It helps you sort of focus little by little, step by step, so that by the time you do get to page one, fade in, you've done the hard work already.
Right.
But like I said, it follows all the rules of Save the Cat. It takes you to the beat sheet. It takes you to the board, the 40 cards board, and you can see it all laid out in front of you in your screen.
Now, can you explain? I was going to ask you, can you explain what the board is? Because a lot of people might not know what the board is. I love using the board when I write. It's so helpful. So can you explain it? Because there's the software version, then you're obviously taking it from a real life version, like actual board and stuff. So can you explain what that is?
Yeah, and it's the same thing. When first my introduction to the board also came from Blake, and how we explained it is that he walked into a producer's room, and oddly enough, same thing happened to me a few years after he told me about it. Was that and he sees it's a cork board in front of him where there are little index cards laid out, and what it is in let's Save the Cat, how we have it is that you have a big, whether it's a cork board or whiteboard or whatever it is you're writing, you break that board into 4 rows, each row representing an act. Well, but you're going to say, okay, but it's 4 rows, so why 4 acts? Well, it's Act 1, Act 2A, Act 2B, and Act 3. And in each row, we have 10 cards. And each card really is a scene or a sequence. Now, not meaning that, again, it's always, you can start, what you're doing really here now with the board is you are writing, right? And you're working on scenes already. You're doing scene structure work already here. And it allows you to sort of to follow your hero in terms of its plot, in terms of its emotional story throughout. You're able to lay out scenes and see if it's working in Act 1 or in Act 2.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
If it's not, you can move them around. But then the nice thing about it is that, again, you're able, just in a very visual, immediate sense, just by looking at the board, you're able to look at it right away and see how the story is playing out. You can see where the characters are moving forward. You can even, I think one thing I always emphasize with writers, so when they do the board, is that make sure you're also able to follow the emotional story in the board. One thing we like talking about in Save the Cat is having the B story. And what the B story is for those who are familiar with it, what it represents is really just the theme of the story, right? So what I tell them, so if
is that the subplot, or is that the B? Is that a subplot, or is that?
It's not necessarily a subplot. It's the emotional story.
Got it.
That your hero must go through.
So then, so what's the emotional story of Titanic? Just so people have a reference.
Well, let's say for Rose, right? The physical story is, I'm going to get married to, what's his name, Billy Zane.
Right, Billy Zane. Right.
The emotional story for her is that she has to be able to tell her mom, I'm not going to do what you're telling me anymore.
And she wants to be free.
I have to be my own person.
Right.
And that's what Jack, what's his name, Leonardo DiCaprio, teaches her.
Because she is the character. She is the main character of that story.
She is. I agree with you. She is the main character. And that's what, like I said, Leo does for her. He's the one who forces her to learn the lesson, to learn the theme of the story in order, to be her own person.
So in other words, it's not a subplot, but exactly like the outside, the obvious thing is like, I'm going to marry this guy and I'm going on this boat.
Yeah.
But the emotion about it, what the intention of her character is this, what she's going after. This is the inner struggle or the inner journey, the inner journey.
It's the inner journey. It's the internal story.
Got
it. Same thing with Luke Skywalker. The external was take down the Death Star. Right? The internal is he needs to learn to be a Jedi, to believe in himself, to believe in. Right? So that's what, so going back now to the board, when I tell writers, you can mark these cards, whether you use color or whatever it is to mark them. Let's say blue is going to be external story, red is going to be internal story. It's just a simple dot that you can put on each card, and then you can see where you're playing out the emotional story as well. So I think the board is, like I said, hopefully I'm explaining it well enough.
Oh, yeah.
That you're able to see right away just by standing in front of it, what you have, where the story is going, where your hero is going, how you're playing out the physical and the emotional story throughout. But it's also, it saves you if you do it now, meaning, if you do with the board right away before you start writing pages. If you see like a certain sequence is not working, like in the middle of second act, then you can either take it out, put it away for another day, or maybe you say, actually, this sequence might work better in Act 1, right? So, but you can do it right away, as opposed to doing it later or after 6 months or 9 months of having written a first draft, right? And suddenly say, wait a minute, page 50 to 55 wasn't working, but I should have known that 9 months ago, right? And save myself the time.
Right.
So that's the beauty of what the board is.
Now, this in the software, do you have that option for the dots?
Yes, you do.
Oh,
actually,
great.
The software you do. There's a little, I can't get to all of that. We won't have time, but there are little places where you can assign color to it.
Perfect. It sounds wonderful.
And it's just a simple thing, but even assigning color to characters, I think it's a wonderful little trick. If let's say green is going to be my villain, right? But if you're looking at your board and your entire second row has no green in it, then you're in trouble because you don't have a villain in it, and the villain is the source of conflict.
That would be the first Twilight movie.
Yeah.
One of the worst films I've ever seen. I don't care what anyone says. It was horrendous. The villain shows up 20 minutes. I don't care spoiling it. 20 minutes at the end. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding? The first hour and 20 minutes is just of them pining for each other. It was horrendous. Horrendous.
There you go. See, if they had a board,
they had a well. Look, they made a couple bucks on that. So what do we know? But but it's definitely not being studied by screenwriters around the world for their structure, story, narrative, character, or directing. But I'm sorry. Again, I apologize. I just couldn't. When you said that, I'm like, yes, no villain. That's the first movie that came to mind. I'm like, because look, what happens in Star Wars? First, like 3-4 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
The best opening of a villain, arguably ever. And everybody, and that was a wonderful thing about that film, is that I've probably seen every interview with George Lucas ever about that movie, about Star Wars. And he said that no matter where you were in the world, even if you had no idea who Darth Vader was, you knew, and you didn't speak English.
Yeah.
You knew that was the bad guy. That's the brilliance and the universal appeal of those movies. Is like you knew, and they did that thing with Kylo Ren as well. That the way they designed his mask and it was all very strategic to portray a villain instantly.
Yeah. No, I agree. Another great example, if I may, is which again was one of my favorites, was Whiplash, which I mentioned earlier.
Oh, so brilliant!
The way they introduced J.K. Simmons in that first 2 minutes.
Oh. Brilliant.
For me, it was just as good as introducing Darth Vader.
I mean, I'll tell you what, when I watched that movie, it was hard to watch. That's a movie that's hard to watch a little bit because he is so brilliant at being just a horrible human being.
Yeah, exactly.
He's so brilliant at it that it just, I felt like, I'm like, just leave, man. Just leave. It's not worth it, man. Just go. Don't play the damn drums anymore. Just go.
But yet we watch.
But we
he doesn't want to walk away, right?
But you know what's brilliant is, and he deserved the Oscar without question because he carries that movie.
He does.
The whole movie is him. I know he's not the main character, but he is so overpowering as the actor, and the character is so overpowering that without him, there's so much. He is the Empire.
He is,
and this poor kid is Luke, and it's like, but that's if Darth Vader was yelling at Luke the entire movie and throwing symbols at his head.
He's throwing a chair with the Force.
It's just throwing the Force, like, come on, Luke,
Are
3 beats.
Crying now to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
3 beats with the lightsaber. Come on. So now, and you also have an app, right? The Save the Cat app. Is that different than the software?
No, it's the same, but like you said, it's an app. It's for your
laptop, iPad,
it's for your iPhone or your
iPad.
I guess your Android. I have to be clear. I'm not sure about that actually, but I know you can work it on your iPhone. But it helps you go to the same thing. It's sort of like a miniature version of what you can get on your laptop or your computer.
Got it.
But it's the same thing. It helps you go through again your log line, and then the beats, and then you can even do the cards there. But each card will be like one because it is just an iPhone.
Right, exactly.
One card.
Yeah, right? It's like one card. It doesn't give you the same.
About it is that you can play around it. You can I guess what's the word? Play between the app and the software. I think you can link it if I have that right.
Okay.
So what you have in your app, it goes on a cloud, and
right.
pull it out in your computer.
And if you're at Starbucks writing your script and you have an idea real quick and you don't have your laptop, pop it into your iPad or iPhone. Because I was talking to another screenwriter the other day. Is like people here in LA, people outside of LA don't understand that if you walk into a Starbucks, there's at least 2 people writing a screenplay. Any Starbucks in Los Angeles at any time of the day or night.
Yeah, exactly.
Never fails. Never fails. So now comes to the part of the show that is the toughest questions I ask all my guests. So are you ready, sir?
All right, I hope so.
Okay. What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether that be in the film business or in life in general?
You know what? This for me, it's the discipline of writing.
Mm-hmm.
That was for me personally. I think it's something also that a lot of sort of writers struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
It is especially those who want to make writing their career or their job.
It's tough, right? Man. That white page is a mountain.
Yeah, but it is really just simply finding the time, day in and day out, to say I'm going to write, whether it's just for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, or a page a day. because it's so easy to get caught up with, especially like I said, for those the newer ones, right? Especially those who have a day job, right? You can easily get caught up with other things, and before you know it, it's a week has passed. You haven't written a single page. Before you know it, it's 2 months already, right? You haven't written 10 pages. So it's not necessarily a lesson, right? But it is being able to discipline yourself and say that I will be writing today. And again, for me, it's you have to put a goal, a daily goal that is attainable for you. So
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
I know other writers who do like a page a day. I know someone who does 6 pages a day, which is tough. I tried doing 6 pages a day.
Ooh, it's rough.
It's tough. It sounds a lot easier than 6. But it is. But once you're doing it, like, oh, God, it's tough. Yeah. Right? But you have to find a system that works for you, that makes it, like I said, attainable each and every day. So whether you go by page count or by minute count, you have to do it. And if it means having to wake up a little earlier, or tell your kids at the end of the day, sorry, daddy's playing right now on his own.
Yes, exactly.
Come in, you have to do it. And I think, if anything, it's just that you have to keep writing. If you want to really be a good writer, and I tell this to all writers, really, you just have to write. It's not just writing, but also reading scripts, not necessarily just watching movies. Yes, watching movies is nice, but read scripts as well. And you have to find a way to put that into your schedule as well.
Yeah,
I think that's really the best lesson for one to become a not just a good writer, but to be really a working writer.
If I may quote Woody Allen, 90% of success is just showing up.
Very true.
It's true, that consistency of showing up every day and doing the work, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's 10 minutes, but it's that everyday thing. And that's what people get hard. Like if you can get into that routine of just doing it every day, little by little. And trust me, I know even Academy Award winning writers have problems.
Yeah.
Writing. Like they're just like, oh God, I gotta go and write. Yeah. It's like it's writing is one of the most laborious processes on the planet, and it's one of the most underappreciated parts of the industry, without question. Because without a great script, there is no movies, and it is rough. So that's a great piece of advice. Now, what are your top 3 favorite films of all time?
Oh man, I think this is even the tougher question.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Just pick 3. All right. One would be, I think, the safe answer. But I really loved it, and it's one of those movies I keep watching over and over again. It's Shawshank Redemption.
Of course.
Right?
It's one of my top 3 as well. Twilight, obviously, too, but no, I'm joking. No, Shawshank.
A
close second was Twilight. No, Shawshank is amazing. It's amazing. It's honestly, to me, it's as perfect of a movie as you can get for me, because it's my generation's Godfather.
True. Very, very, very true. I think same with me. It's funny. The reason why I love it so much is because it kind of breaks so many rules, but it all works.
Yep.
Right? It's all like, whose story is it? Red? Is it Andy's? Right? But you're going to go there at the end of the movie. You're just like, who cares?
So I was going to say, like, whose story? And like now when you ask me that, I'm like, whose story is it? Is it Andy's? Is it Red's?
Yeah. Right.
But I think it's Red's. Maybe because he's the narrator.
It's Red's.
Because he's
because you look at it in terms of, and again, for me, it's always like, who had the biggest change, right? And it's Red.
Yeah,
who had the biggest change.
Red is
story. Although you would think a lot of the action being instigated was being instigated by Andy.
But right? Andy didn't make that large of a change. Not as big as he was just doing what he does.
Yeah, exactly.
But Red, from the moment you see, and you actually see them in different tent poles of the movie, when that whole interview with the board, the parole board, how he changes, and you can literally, I mean, he really lays it out for you. Frank Darabont does, and it's absolutely brilliant. And another one of his movies, Green Mile. I love Green Mile.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead. Sorry.
But Shawshank, again, I think that's number 1 for me.
Yeah.
Another one, I guess, again, there's no really order.
Of course.
One of the most perfect scripts I've read, and the movie as well came out really, really nicely, was Little Miss Sunshine.
Oh, it's such a brilliant movie. It's such a brilliant movie.
Right? I tell you, reading, and I tell this to all writers, when I read that script, I said it was as perfect as I could get reading a script.
Yeah,
Right?
it's tight. It's a tight
it's
script.
tight, and you're following all these characters. Again, one of those that Michael Arndt did a great job is building all these characters. We get to know all the characters right away in the first 10 minutes. We're following all their stories, and it's great. And it's one of those, again, my way of gauging, like if it's a favorite of mine, if when you're just surfing the TV,
Oh yeah,
do nothing, then if you happen to see it, then you stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though you've seen it 50 times already before.
Right.
It's one of those. Little Miss Sunshine. And then the other one, a smaller movie that I really, really, really loved as well, was Billy Elliot.
Oh yeah, I love Billy Elliot. I remember Billy Elliot. That was a really sweet film.
Yeah. And I think maybe just happened to be the time of me when I had my first child, when it first came out. So the whole father-son thing was,
You secretly want to dance. I understand.
But again, I loved, how they played out, how a kid's journey of him simply wanting to dance played against the backdrop of what's happening in his dad's world, with the coal miners striking and having that bigger theme out there, but yet their theme really was just the same. I think it just, and makes you laugh, it makes you cry. It's what the movie should be.
That's a great list.
Yeah, so that's kind of my top 3, I think. For now.
For now, yeah. That's 2016.
If you ask me this tomorrow, it may change.
Of course. Now, what's the most underrated film you've ever seen?
This is a tough one. I think I always look for, kind of movies every year. There's like one small movie that comes out that for me is like, how come I didn't even know that came out in the movie house? I've watched it in DVD, but I loved it completely. Right. And they're sort of like, they have that indie feel, but although they're recognizable actors in it.
Sure.
Right. I think like in 2013, there's like The Way Back.
Oh yeah, I like The Way Back.
Which is a great movie. It had Steve Carell, Toni Collette, great cast. There was just in 2014, there's a small one with the Skeleton Twins. This with Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig.
I haven't seen that one.
It's a small movie, right? It's very indie-ish, but I just love how they built the characters and the relationship that they have. It goes for me every year. I have kind of the one that I love that I felt like was really underrated.
So 2015, what's 2015?
That's 2015 for me. I was going to say, but it's also actually looked it up, and it was 2014 again. This is Where I Leave You.
Okay.
But I think one big one that I felt was underrated, which I didn't even hear about it until somebody told me, was Moon. Ever see Moon?
Oh yeah, that's the one with Sam Rockwell. Yeah.
I in terms of like thriller movies, this was one of those that was like, wow, this really grabbed me. It was like, what the hell is going on here? Right. And really, just nice thing about it, you're really following one character.
Yeah.
The Sam Rockwell character, right? But then it's like you're caught in it.
Yeah, you're in the web. You can't get out.
And like I said, I found out about it simply because somebody told me about it. And I said, okay, I had to watch it. And so now I tell everybody, have you seen Moon? It's like
that's the brilliant thing about when you find a little gem like that. You're like, why hasn't someone else seen this? What's going on?
Yeah.
So where can people find more about you and more about Save the Cat?
Well, Save the Cat is a website, savethecat.com. Or blakesnyder.com, but it's the same. I think the easy one to remember, savethecat.com. And in there, the website talks about things that we do, workshops that we have, consultations we do. But it also, we also bring out beat sheets of movies that have come out, which is always a great resource for writers.
Yeah, you have some new ones now too of some of the most recent movies.
Yeah. And we have people who contribute into it. So that's kind of the best way to keep up with Save the Cat. And again, like I said, it's an ongoing thing. It's a way of keeping Blake's method and alive and updated all the time.
Fantastic. Well, Jose, man, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. I hope you had fun. All
right. Thank you very much for having us, Alex.
Seriously, guys, if you've not read this book, you've got to go out and get it. Save the Cat. It is an awesome, awesome book. It's just Blake wrote it so wonderfully, and it really opens up your eyes to a lot of different avenues of what it takes to be a screenwriter and how to tell a story. And his method is pretty amazing how it matches up in the world of movies today. And in the actual blog post or the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/BPS014, I put a couple of videos of how Blake's method measures up to certain movies, and they actually go through scene by scene of these very famous Hollywood movies, and you can see where all of his points line up perfectly. It's quite remarkable to watch, so definitely check that out. And guys, please head over to screenwritingpodcast.com and sign up and subscribe to the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. It really helps the show out a lot and helps us get this information out into the world. So thank you so, so much. And as always, keep on writing, no matter what. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast at bulletproofscreenplay.com. That's BULLETPROOFSCREENPLAY.com.